Hello everybody, welcome back to ESPN's Football Forecast with myself, James Alcott. We've got Nubaid Haroon as always, and for the first time, or certainly the first time with myself, Sam Ty is here. Congratulations to Sam, who supports Aston Villa, but also has had a child very recently. And we're going to start off with Aston Villa and talk about the team that they're playing this weekend, of course, Newcastle United. And if Aston Villa, sorry, I nearly said Arsenal, could be Arsenal, if Aston Villa are this season's Newcastle. Let's kind of review both teams. Let's start off with Aston Villa. Feeling good?
Yeah, mostly. I mean, look, the goals have dried up a little bit over the last three games. It's just been the one, or there have been disallowed goals in each of those. And that gauntlet just before Christmas where they had to play, Man City and Arsenal in quick succession, it took so much out of them physically that I think everybody just drooped a bit. So a little bit of rest, and hopefully for Villa's sake, they can kind of find it again. There's a lot of the same players playing a lot of the same games there, and it just took its toll. But Villa at home pretty much always win. Newcastle away almost always lose at this point. So if you're looking for a game here on paper that you think Villa can get back to those winning ways and score some goals, it probably is this one.
It's so odd, isn't it, that Newcastle, especially when we go back to that first game of the season, where Newcastle, who I thought this might happen. I thought they might struggle as the season progressed. But after that game, and I think after maybe up to the PSG game in the Champions League, I think I apologised after that one because I was like, wow, these guys aren't going to run out of energy. It seems like they've run out of energy a little bit.
I think every time we come on here, me and James will always go, they've got high energy, but it's going to go at some point. And to be fair, recently we've been going, this is just them. And now I'll turn my back on that again. They are actually knackered. I think that the fact they play Champions League football and the intensity of Champions League football and the intensity that Newcastle try and play it and try and execute has now got to a point where they're picking up injuries, and you combine the two together and now they do look like they're burning out in the middle of a season, which is why they're now getting punished by the other sides that are just a bit stronger. Like they've lost the last four, and they've lost to Forest and Luton and Liverpool and City. So at the moment, you don't know which Newcastle's going to turn up.
And the problem here is that Newcastle can only really play at that high intensity. So the only way they can control a game is to play at high intensity. So if they do need to drop off because they've only got 12 fit senior players, which seems like it's been the case a couple of times this season, they still have to go hell for leather, because if they relent, they can't play their way and they can't control the game.
I think it's a great point. I think in terms of playing their way as well, like that phrase, our intensity is our identity. Yeah. Absolutely, but in the wrong way right now, because they haven't got the intensity that they need. It feels a bit like, like that. There used to be a show called Gladiators where you'd be on the Travelator, and if you didn't, you could give it everything. And if you got to the top, you might get your hands on it, and you'd be exhausted, but you could pull yourself up. I feel like that's Newcastle a little bit this year, where with the Champions League, I think with that intensity, and with the season prior to that, if they'd got up to that group stage and the knockouts, they would have had, I think, a bit more energy about them, momentum about them, and the injuries might not have hurt them as much. Or is that, I don't know.
Well, I think momentum's a big thing. Like we always talk about momentum in football. Villa at home have momentum, which is why there's this whole feeling of like they won't lose at home. Yeah. On the flip side, Newcastle have no momentum away from home. So regardless of who they're playing, I mean, Forest played them off the park, and you're sort of going, Nottingham Forest haven't played anyone off the park this season. So I think had they got through in the group stage, because of the feeling, if you remember that PSG game, they were like, we're actually the real deal. Like we're here to stay. Yeah. And because that got completely shut down, I think now they're like, oh wait, legs are a bit heavy now.
Yeah. And also I think the whole scenario with Newcastle, the fact that before, when they were in a relegation battle, a couple of Januaries ago, it was one where, we need to get some players here to fix it. And then you move it on, you add a couple more, and it's all quite exciting. But there's always still been that bit of a drop-off if they had the injuries, and they have had the injuries this year, which I think is why I've said on this show that, I don't think Eddie Howe should be in any kind of trouble right now, because I think you can see what he can do when he's got everything he needs. And in time, I think he will beef up the squad a little bit. On the idea of Aston Villa and their momentum this year, how far do you think they can go this year?
Well, the goalposts keep moving here, don't they? Because I think the start of the season, fans were like, we'll take 7th. Then, you get a few wins, you go, we'll take 6th, or we'll take 5th. And now it's like, well, if we don't get 4th, we've ruined it, right? And that's just the way it goes. So I think to Nubaid's point, that's your momentum right there. It's like, well, hang on a minute. You keep setting your sights a little bit higher and a little bit higher. And Villa, to their credit, can control games with the ball in a way that Newcastle necessarily can't. It's not about intensity, it's about just quality of possession play. So that's a real positive for them, because you can slow the tempo right down there. If you're playing Sunday, Thursday, Sunday, you can still play the same way every single time and maintain control. So in that case, it looks pretty good for them. But of course, they do need to steer clear of the same injury plague that Newcastle have fallen foul of. Because if Emi Martinez and Douglas Luiz go down, this team goes straight down.
Oh, so is it as simple as that? Because I would have put forward the idea that maybe Villa might not have as high a ceiling of individual players, but as a collective probably have a bit more depth than Newcastle.
Well, it's a good team and it's very well coached, but of course there's still players there that you cannot take out. Like the high line works because Emi Martinez can sweep up behind. Right. If his stand-in walks in, Robin Olsen, the whole game plan changes, right? So yes, it's a well-coached team, but there's a few players here, Watkins, Douglas Luiz, arguably Pau Torres and Emi Martinez, that really set the standard, and if you take them out, I think bad things would happen.
I think you can see in front of goal that the natural inconsistency of Ollie Watkins, although he has been consistent this season. I don't want to start on Villa fans because they'll murder me for this, but he's been consistent this season.
I'm not going to reach over.
That's why they moved the desk further away. But because he's often been inconsistent, they've now got to a point, I think, where you can see that they're going, we really could do with someone else chipping in with goals. That's where I think they'll come unstuck further down the line.
Okay. To the game itself. So Aston Villa's home record, phenomenal. 9 wins in 10. Newcastle's away form, second worst in the league. They lost 5 on the bounce away from home. Over the last 8 games, they're averaging 2.25 goals conceded per game. Last season, 33 goals for the entirety of the season, 0.87 per game. It's a very awkward time for them. And I think this is a great stat. The fact that nearly 60% of their goals, 19 of the last 32, this campaign have come after the 60th minute. Again, for that little bit of insight when it comes to Aston Villa, is this one where you think Aston Villa will be able to turn it on in that last 30 minutes? Is because that's what all the data's saying?
Usually, yeah, because the crowd, about 60 minutes, the crowd, if Villa aren't in the lead, they go, well, come on, guys, what are you playing at? And I've been to the stadium a couple of times where that has happened, and Crystal Palace, for example, at home back in September, which was a bit of a turning point, conceded a bit of a dodgy goal, and I think the Villa of old may have crumbled after that one. And here the crowd go, whoa, this is not how we do things here. And Douglas Luiz stands there and goes, guys,
the fans are in a completely different place here, aren't they?
I mean, it was. Yeah, there have been some very difficult nights at Villa Park over the years, in the last 10 years or so. But right now, it is genuinely, under the lights, it is an actual fortress. I know we overuse that a bit, but it is the case. Just on the 9 wins out of 10 point, the one game that was
it Sheffield United? Yeah, I was going to say.
So did you think Sheffield United were going to go into that game with any chance? No. What was their away form looking like? Terrible.
Yeah.
So it's not.
Well, that's one thing I think with Villa is, for them, can they deal with the pressure of having that record now?
So that's exactly what I was going to say. On the flip side, was like Newcastle probably need to go back to where they were last season, where they were having those away trips and they're actually going, we might actually be a bit more pragmatic here. And I think for Villa, they now have to take the game to every team they play at home, which eventually will cause problems. I just think Newcastle probably don't have the players to get on the counters out. No Harvey Barnes, which I think they bought him in, and at the start of the season, we were literally going, last 30 minutes, this guy's going to terrorise everyone. But I think they lack that spark on the counter, which will play into Villa's hands.
So this game last year at Villa Park was 3-0 to Villa. Newcastle pressed like crazy.
And that was a bit of a shock at the time, wasn't
it? And Villa just drew them onto them, played it around them and cut through them. And it was a masterclass in baiting the press and playing through. And Mings was great. Jacob Ramsey was great. Louise and Ollie Watkins were fantastic as well. So if we're saying that Newcastle can only play that one intense way and they will draw themselves onto Villa, then Villa have changed a bit from last season to this season. They are a bit more proactive. But Villa already have a pretty clear template of how to beat Eddie Howe's Newcastle.
Okay, I'm sold. 2-0 win for me for Aston Villa, I think. I think it's all there in black and white, no pun intended. I just think Newcastle are just, in the doldrums. It's not the right game for them right now. Despite, it being quite an odd January in terms of games that different teams have played. Nabeed, what do you think?
I'm going to go 2-0 as well. I honestly don't see Newcastle winning again away from home. They are so bad away from home, and the injuries aren't getting any easier.
Sure. 3-1 to Villa. Sure, why not?
Guaranteed Newcastle win on its way.